Indeed. Again, Barbara, I'd like to say thank you very much for this. I thought of a couple of things to start off with, maybe that there's this supposedly a Chinese curse of may you live in interesting times, which I think is, having watched your video, is very apt for this. Um, um, so that's something to be aware of. And you talk about paradigm shift, and as systems thinkers, we are all fairly well aware of the leverage points concept of Donella Meadows, and we have at one end of the scale there, sort of leverage point of just changing the parameters of things, which is what I tend to call twiddling the knobs on the system. At the other end of that lever, the 12th thing she comes to is the concept of a paradigm shift. And obviously, it's not an easy thing to engineer anyway at all. And we're hoping that your talk today will help us start to get some sort of sense of what that might mean, and what's involved in actually shifting those sort of huge ways of thinking and attitudes of behavior, etc. So, Barbara, thank you. Without any more ado, I shall share my screen, and hopefully then we can see um, your presentation. This, let's see if this works. Thank you, Barbara.
Have you ever wondered what global collaboration might look like? Collaboration that releases us from past and present folly. This is what we shall be envisioning during this presentation. And it's with many thanks to Ian Roderick and the Schumacher Institute for offering this opportunity to share my imagination with you. Elon Musk is now inspiring a culture war against fascist-leaning oligarchs, especially those who've bought up the megaphone of the mainstream media. This float was photographed in Germany. The letters AfD on his nappy signify his association with the far-right political party Alternative für Deutschland. His infantile behavior is acknowledged by his outfit, and the American flag that he is waving has been cut down to represent a swastika. His megaphone is labelled X and is shown with poo oozing out.
The YouTube license. Perhaps.
Oh. we're back.
The matrix
I'll cut that out of the
here
recording.
Appears on the website, the Schumacher Institute. It advocates the convergence and contraction of wealth. What does it take for this to really materialize? I'm saying we could simply put a cap on wealth and then use that surplus to ensure everyone has a means to subsist. If we were to throw in free access to contraceptive services, then we would certainly see the start of genuine convergence and contraction. Environmental science reveals that human population size, affluence, and technology are all key drivers in degrading the Earth's environment. But we're still thinking in the box of growth economics, which increases all of these drivers. When we ignore scientific insights, we soon feel the pain. In the case of something like Newton's law, but with iPod, the insights are not so evident, especially since industrial agriculture has enabled us to grow our population well beyond the carrying capacity of our planet. It is only the data on ecological overshoot that informs us that we are in ecological debt. These drivers of environmental destruction are all tools that could become solutions if we were to use them wisely. This is a screenshot from a little animation that features on my homepage. The data on ecological footprint globally shows that we have been overexploiting the entire biocapacity of Earth for more than 50 years. This phenomenon is called global ecological overshoot. To become genuinely sustainable, we need to release about half of Earth's biocapacity for other life forms to flourish and diversify. Extrapolating the data trends into the past implies that we started exceeding half Earth's biocapacity about 100 years ago, when our population was about 2 billion. If we were to minimize our consumption per capita, then we may be able to achieve sustainability for more than 2 billion. Dismantling the wealth hierarchy would make it much easier to minimize consumption per capita. The social upheaval that is escalating in America right now is evidence of the momentum that is building for the flip from growth economics and wealth inequality, massive wealth inequality, to what we refer to as equitable IPAT degrowth. IPAT degrowth means a concerted effort to return within the carrying capacity of Earth in a way that minimizes human suffering. Which all our politicians still and educators are advocating and teaching growth economics. The social reforms of the last 70 years are also under threat now from oligarchs who control the mainstream media. The shift to degrowth has many faces, everyone working on sustainability or diversity, equity and inclusion. They all represent different facets of the degrowth movement. So far, no organisation is discussing the need to actually downsize the global economy and global population. And until now, that is, the fact that I'm delivering this talk under the prestigious umbrella of the Schumacher Institute represents a significant step in progress towards equitable degrowth. The Schumacher Institute have also been kind enough to invite me to become a fellow of the Institute, which I accept. Heartfelt thanks. It's the first time my work has been recognised by an official body.
Don't use bullet points in a presentation. Look, if you're responsible for driving new sales into a business you own.
Sorry about the advert breaks.
The Global Footprint Network offers an open data platform. It has a map of the world, and you can drill down into the data for a particular country to learn how their consumption compares with their biocapacity. This is an example of the type of graph obtained when you select a country. We can see from this that the Americans have a monstrously high consumption per capita. They have a very large and fertile country, and yet they are still exceeding their biocapacity within their borders by over 100%. We are not remotely sustainable right now until we limit ourselves to half Earth's biocapacity. Other life forms cannot thrive. With 8 billion, we need to be averaging under 3/4 of a global hectare per capita. Only the most impoverished parts of the world average such low consumption per capita. And these people lead challenging lives with short life expectancies. Anyone who believes that we can focus solely on overconsumption and ignore overpopulation has not recognized the scale of our ecological debts. This represents humanity right now. Our frantic attempts at energy transition are simply causing us to break through the final threads remaining in our life support systems. We are perpetuating business as usual rather than thinking about changing our economic strategy entirely. Breaking the news that growth economics is now past its sell-by date frequently feels like facing up to a herd of stampeding cattle. In the film Australia, a young Aborigine puts himself between a cliff edge and a stampeding herd and manages to soothe the stampede. If you want to challenge the popular direction of the herd, it is important to stay calm, confident, polite, and assertive. It takes considerable determination and practice. So don't be downhearted at the outset. Persevere. The spectrum of the paradigm shift reflects the different degrees to which denial and delusion is chosen over scientific consensus. Our carbon dioxide levels continue to climb, and so does the surface temperature of Earth. Unless we can manifest a willingness to be guided by scientific consensus, the chances of us surviving this century will continue to decline. The United States are polarizing the debate, with the new government firmly choosing the path towards increased denial and delusion. Their leaders are attempting to eradicate the mention of climate change and also the social science surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. It now looks likely that they will crash the global economy in their effort to become isolationists. In this way, they are showing us how interconnected we all are. Our economic algorithms do not consider wealth distribution at all, and they are causing wealth inequality to grow. There are no hurdles to stop the wealthy from squandering natural resources on unnecessary and ecologically expensive enterprises like traveling to Mars. My advice is don't be a doomer, be a doer instead. We are in a bad place, but there are peaceful and there are enjoyable possibilities going forwards, and none of them require economic growth. There'll be much more fun, I assure you. It's so pressured, our world today. It's just a bit of reference background that you might like to consider later. These are just some of the people and organisations doing serious legwork to raise awareness about the numerous flaws in our socio-economic model. Bernie Sanders and Robert Wright actually need to be added to this list. The perfect Dasgupta is one of the few economists who admits that overpopulation is an issue. The Dasgupta Review was commissioned by the UK government. It was delivered in 2021. Although this contribution is significant and helpful, it still falls far short of maximising mitigation. When we declared that we have human rights, we failed to recognise the physical limits of Earth and the rights of other life forms. We failed to build in any acknowledgement of the need to work within the limits of Earth. This omission allows irresponsible overconsumption and overpopulation. I am suggesting a new concept to plug the omission in the Declaration of Human Rights. I'm suggesting that we declare a shared aspiration to downsize the global economy and population until we return within the carrying capacity of Earth. This aspiration could be ratified by the United Nations in the same way that the Declaration of Human Rights was embraced. The ratification process itself would stimulate awareness and discussion regarding our consumption patterns and inspire us on the path of collaborating peacefully to share ecological resources fairly during the downsizing process.
Hi, I'm Joe Delaney. Today we're going to talk about what's the fastest way to get to a 10% body fat and still look and feel okay when you get there.
Call this new initiative an aspiration for global Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a philosophy that recognizes the joy of sharing resources fairly. I remember reading about some research into universal basic income in which some Africans in a particular village were given extra income. Some of the recipients did not seem to benefit much from their additional income, and on investigation, it turned out that they had been secretly sharing their extra income with the other villagers. I have Africans who are very supportive of my work. In my experience, they understand the climate crisis and its causes much more quickly than my European and American friends. Around system change, we need to lever our priorities at the highest level. Collaborating to implement a wealth cap to release wealth to enable everyone to subsist would bring a completely new set of priorities. Combining that with a desire to shrink our population back within the carrying capacity of Earth will empower people to protect their unborn from entering the unfolding meta-crises. Advertising and influencing can switch from promoting ecologically costly pursuits to those that promote health and well-being without incurring high ecological costs. There is also a bold and worthy initiative called the World Call to Action, which talks profound system change. It is being led by the Club of Rome and the Council for Human Future. The aspiration for global Ubuntu would accelerate their work to even higher ambitions to share resources fairly as a matter of urgency. We have powerful mass communication facilities. We could easily promote a global Ubuntu philosophy. We could persuade people that pursuit of profit and population growth is very unwise in the situation of overshoot. A cross-party government would share the responsibility as we collaborate to provide the essentials for everyone. The basic provision would allow people to leave eco-costly employment, free them up to focus on services that enhance well-being with minimal ecological cost. Contraceptive health care would be freely available. Civilians would be asked to share their resources with local communities to build communal spirit and emotional resilience going forwards. We need to acknowledge the reality that business as usual is exacerbating a mass extinction event. A large section of our global workforce is employed in ecologically damaging pursuits that are non-essential. We need to release these people from that trap. It will start with teaching about the IPAT insights and overshoot. With a widespread understanding of overshoot, we can then implement an emergency wealth cap to facilitate minimal consumption. This will provide the excess funds to make basic subsistence available to everyone. It also prevents ecological resources from being squandered by the wealthy. The subsistence provisions would be accompanied with free contraceptive services to protect the unborn from sharing our predicament. Community hubs that work towards self-sufficiency will build up our emotional resilience and our sense of oneness. Our world is not a safe place for any of us right now. Minimal childbirth will free up a lot of time and energy for young adults as we all work together to identify how to assist in the downsizing process and the process of ecological recovery.
Feeling tired? It's your pillow's fault.
Oops,
Think you know what's lurking in your pillow? It's time to toss that old one.
These ideas are elaborated in my science paper. Scientists' Warning proposes a roadmap to ecological justice. The paper can be found on the SSRN website for unpublished research. Only one person was willing to peer review the paper, and therefore it was never published. We can all get involved in the aspiration to return within the carrying capacity of Earth. My ideas are only one example of a possible path to maximise mitigation. We can all work to raise awareness and inspire others. When we persevere with non-violent language and science and reason, others will want to maximise mitigation. It is an exciting journey in which we are already discovering different values and different ways forward. Wherever you are on the spectrum of the shift, the momentum for profound social change is building very rapidly. To achieve genuine sustainability, we need to shrink the global economy and our population by about 75%. In this context, our sustainable development needs to be focused on spiritual and emotional development. The UN Sustainable Development Goals can only be achieved as part of a collaborative downsizing exercise. It might actually help us to rename them as sustainable degrowth goals during the time that it takes us to return within the carrying capacity of Earth. Some of us are gripped by the pantomime that is unfolding in America. Both Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and the adulation that they receive, are the direct result of a social structure that worships a wealth supremacy hierarchy. We are taught to admire people who accrue wealth. Their influence and their power is a consequence of an unwise set of social values. Massive leap in emotional maturity that is required right now. It will help us to rethink some powerful concepts that underpin modern society. Concepts like nationality, religion, gender are frequently used by people in power to divide and rule over others. We are a diverse species. Conflicts escalate with powerful propaganda designed to persuade one group to dislike and fear another group, to try to dominate over them. Our rules-based system serves the hierarchy of the wealthy and the powerful. It has defined our world ever since we ceased to be hunter-gatherers. Looking at the ecological data for Israel, its massive ecological footprint is comparable to an oil-rich Arab state. It operates with an enormous ecological debt, which is shown in red on this graph. The tiny slither of white underneath represents the available biocapacity. Israel uses about 17 times the actual capacity that it has available. It is dependent on fossil fuels to facilitate the greening of the desert. It's a hypocritical claim. All wars are essentially conflicts over resources, either natural resources, human resources, or physical man-made resources. We are living in a time of chronic overshoot, and this is driving increased belligerence from nations that once pretended to be peaceful, but in reality were always overexploiting and dominating over other people and nature herself. There are powerful parallels between the mindset that motivates genocide and that which drives the ecocidal desire for economic growth. Both require prolonged propaganda promoting fear and supremacy. The daily ecocide of business as usual is oiled by the wheels of mainstream media and global commerce. Genocide involves massive inequality of power, and ecocide is aggravated by oligarchs controlling political agenda. The film, The Zone of Interest, revealed how genocide becomes normalized in the eyes of the perpetrators. Likewise, ecocide is normalized as we spend most of our time in comfortable concrete boxes where we are unaware of the suffering of other life forms. Genocide arises when the theories of supremacy are applied to other humans. Ecocide arises when we consider humans to be genetically more valuable than other life forms. This is especially ironic right now because we are engineering our own extinction. Both phenomena result in wanton destruction of life on Earth and habitat. We reorganize ourselves to align with the shared objective to downsize. We shall need to change our priorities. We did something very similar to this during the COVID lockdown. In the UK, we successfully changed our behaviour patterns overnight. We are in an emergency now, a global emergency. We can achieve vast changes very rapidly. Where there's a will, there is a way. The downsizing conversation urgently needs to begin. If we wish to become genuinely sustainable as a species, we shall need to prioritise the survival of life on Earth over the minutiae of our own brief stay on Earth.
So you're already using ChatGPT, and well, that's awesome. There is one little problem.
The satirical films in the Austin Powers series poke fun at the way powerful people consider their genes to be superior. Elon Musk has already sired more than a dozen mini-me's. Elon's agenda is increasingly narrow and demanding that his followers mirror his personal opinion. This is ironic for someone who bought Twitter to advance free speech. One can only imagine the overwhelming type of mental grooming to which children, powerful oligarchs, must be exposed. Elon's own upbringing reveals that he himself was abused emotionally as a child. There is a sobering paper published by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which presents the statistics on infanticide. It reveals that 1 billion children experienced physical, sexual, or emotional violence in 2017. We are all failing collectively as parents. We do not have a safe global village to offer a newborn. The child deaths in Gaza 2023 will further escalate the statistics on infanticide. Globally, we are performing as extremely irresponsible parents right now. The anti-abortion movement in the USA is ironically called pro-life, yet the movement offers no safety net when mothers cannot access abortion services and then find themselves with a baby that they cannot afford to feed. This has triggered a rise in the discovery of dead infants in dumpsters that have been discarded by mothers unable to support their unplanned newborn. I am particularly impressed with the work of the Fair Start movement. Their legal experts are striving to resolve the deep injustices that exist for any newborn arriving into our unequal global society. Furthermore, the work by economist Gary Stevenson is exceptional. He came from a very disadvantaged background in London, and his book, The Trading Game, reveals how many wealthy people operate much like the mafia. He points out how one's options are limited from birth when born into poverty. For this reason, our democracies are neither meritocratic nor democratic. Instead, they are oligarchies. Raising children needs to be a shared responsibility. Indigenous wisdom observes that it takes a village to raise a child. Whilst we remain in overshoot, we need to aspire to minimize birth rates globally. Accepting this reality puts the folly of overconsumption and the pursuit of profit into perspective. It is an emotional evolution that is required of us. We are playing delusional games with the energy transition. We shall not be realistic until we recognize that minimal birth rates and minimal consumption per capita are prerequisites to genuine sustainability and the survival of our species right now. Our predicament is global. We cannot solve it without global collaboration, to peacefully shrink the global economy. There is nothing physical stopping us from aspiring to maximize mitigation from our predicament. The obstacles only lie in our minds and our civilization that is addicted to growth. It only requires humility and courage to steer into a very different direction. I am one of a small handful of people that believes that we can put our violent history of colonization and supremacy behind us, and we can work peacefully together to maximize mitigation. I firmly believe that we shall find the courage to change ourselves at this challenging moment in history. I believe that we can all learn to let go of the traditional family structure. We can let go of national identity. We can let go of the desire to dominate over others. We can let go of the desire for financial and material gains. We can learn to embrace our oneness and with a shared purpose to downsize, become genuinely sustainable. We can learn to embrace communal living. We can learn to work towards minimizing birth rates and minimizing consumption. And we can derive pleasure from the generosity that is involved when sharing resources fairly between ourselves and the other life forms on Earth. Many thanks again to Ian Roderick from Schumacher Institute for giving me this opportunity to present my ideas for maximizing mitigation from the meta crisis that we are all facing right now.
When I started doing this simple ear trick to help fight off dementia, my friends laughed at me.
Right, let's have a look at what's going on. Barbara, are you okay? Um,
And fine. Have we got any questions coming? We had a few questions in the chat.
right.
John Waters, would you like to
I,
offer
I,
comment or question?
I'm going to try
Oh,
to be brief, but there is absolutely nothing with which I would disagree in what you've just said,
Wow.
and it came as a great relief to see this presentation because with a few colleagues, I've been working on a partial solution to these problems, but unfortunately, almost nobody can understand what I'm trying to do because they don't understand the framing of the problem, which I take to be obvious. To me, everything you've just said is obvious, and I don't have the capacity to frame the problem in such a way that people can understand the solutions I'm trying to explain. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I tried to present uh, part of the picture at a cybernetics conference. There was a whole room full of cyberneticians, and only four of them had a clue of what I was talking about. And they were people who knew me already. So this seems like an almost perfect preamble for the solutions which I'm long overdue to try to present to an audience in some way, which I haven't been able to do because nobody understands what I'm talking about. You've laid, as far as I'm concerned, you've laid out the scope of the problem almost perfectly in a way to which I can attach the many facets of the solutions on which I've been working. So thank you.
Hank, John. Could you tell me you sound like you're in the UK, your accent sounds British.
It is rather, yes.
It's-
Uh, I, I, I I daren't go into too much detail because people will get lost. But one of the fundamental problems that concerns me is that information is lost. We record transactions using very primitive information destructive scalar money systems. They don't distinguish between categories of exchange. They don't preserve information about the provenance, about the supply chains. They record nothing about the environmental and social impact.
oh, yeah.
just a minute, John. What I was going to suggest is that perhaps the Schumacher Institute might invite you to give a little
Well,
talk.
uh,
Barbara, I have asked him before now. John is going to do that very soon.
well,
Oh, brilliant, brilliant.
I've been scared of doing that because I'm 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 exhausted by the blank looks I get when I try to explain what I'm doing. I needed this kind of framing to
Oh,
actually build
wow,
up the context. So
wow.
this comes as a great relief to me.
John, we'll work on it then.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'll just throw in one thing. For example, I don't know how many people would know what I mean if I talk about the Cohen-Dashby theorem, but see, this is the issue. Um, if we think of an economy at any scale as a regulator of for matching resources to needs, then we can then categorize economies in terms of uh, uh, being effective or being ethical or beyond. Now, Kate Rayworth's donut model shows upper and lower bounds, but really there's nothing there to show what's between the rings of the donut.
Hmm.
How do we actually match the immense complexity there is in solving this problem? That's where I'm trying to do something. And it's a slow business. When you're sitting on your own, nobody understands you.
Thanks,
So
John.
I'll shut up now.
No problem. I just put in my apology for the slight technical problem with the presentations on the way through. I was hovering, waiting for the fluent adverts to finish each time. So, but I'm delighted that Barbara was able to present that so well and cogently, and I'm glad you managed to get going with questions, Barbara. That was excellent indeed. Did you want to say anything more about your presentation before we take the next question?
No, I'm keen to hear what people have to say. I see we've got two more
Right.
raised hands.
Okay, let's go then. Naveen, I think you're first there. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. First of all, I'm very happy to participate in this discussion from Nepal. In fact, I have two questions. One question, like, well, there was a kind of the phrase, I mean, what to be done, and you had said like the positive propaganda should be shared. So I want to hear like what could be the, some of the examples of the positive propaganda, because in Nepal, by engaging to the young people, we are promoting the climate justice. So if you share some sorts of positive propaganda, that could be helpful for us. This is my first question, and second question is that the degrowth could be very applicable, particularly for the developed countries. So, in your opinion, what could be, how do you contextualize the degrowth, particularly in the least developed country like Nepal? So this is my second question. Thank you.
Right. I'm in terms Nepal, is that comparable to Global South? Because I've been working with Africans mainly, with my ideas, and in their countries, their main challenge is the culture. Where we have got a culture where we admire wealth, their culture, a man is admired for the number of children that he sires. So that it's a different cultural barrier that they have to get. Both the cultures are damaging. Um, in fact, the consumerist culture we've got in the Western world is more ecologically damaging than the pronatalism in the global South. But they've been work. They find people are well aware of climate change. We don't have the same challenge with the denial and delusion that is going on in the Western world at the moment. It's really interesting that um, if you look at what's happening in the United States, they're actually jettisoning the science. They're deleting climate change is not happening. So the 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 global south are much more connected to reality because because they're pastoral, a lot of them are farmers. They can see the reality much more closely. As for positive propaganda, that um, I'm working with a lady who did the previous Schumacher Institute, um, Adriana, to get some visuals that might help. But my friends in Africa have done, what is it? Have children by choice, not by chance. I think that's the slogan that they've been using. And there's also this, they use a piece of paper and they tear it up to show how little land the parent has to give the child if they have 10 children. So that's the sort of, and it all has, that sort of propaganda has to be sort of one to one. And uh, but I'm sure we could do something powerful with the social media. I just haven't got started developing the materials yet. I've come this far in understanding the problem, but now actually my friend Richard is here, and he's made me realize that the way you deliver it is absolutely key. You need a powerful slogan, something like living within our limits, something like that, need to capture people in the way that make America great again, or um, taking back control. Sorry, somebody had their hand up. I hope it's not.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I think there's some interesting ideas there. If I just come in a little bit on that, the Institute did a big project quite a few years ago now about contraction and convergence, and the it was I think the convergence aspect is what Noreen might be thinking about there, where we have got to really concentrate hard on contraction in the overdeveloped world, and that's we need to overcompensate downwards to a certain extent for so that countries in a more earlier stage of development can actually build up a little bit more. So we all end up roughly at the same place within the limits of the planet. Those ways of shaping policy and how we can direct our attention, I think, is extremely difficult to achieve. But that's the sort of underlying ethos of it. Um, so yeah, I think there is a sort of a sort of a different take on so much of what you said, Barbara, depending on where you are in the world. I think that's the message for Americans is very different from potentially the message for those living in other countries. Would you agree with that?
An idea which I didn't put in there, which is a sort of twinning idea, so that a well-developed village or town might twin with a, a a village that is struggling in the global south, and they can evolve together. So while the consumer obsessed village town sort of downsizes, they can help the the village in the global south to afford to afford free contraception and family planning and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So that the two learn together.
yeah,
And I did have an idea for travel for especially young adults to where the twinning arises, to swap countries, to go and experience what the other side of the coin feels like. And if we get subsistence rations globally, then your shelter, you should be entitled to shelter and food wherever you go in the world, which I thought would be very exciting for young adults, because I'm suggesting that they put off having children for about 5 years until we see whether we're actually going to survive the crises. And traveling the world and learning other cultures is a very important part of the education.
yeah. Good, good. Thank you. Right, Imogen, you have a question there.
Hi. Yes, personally, what an amazing presentation. That was just brilliant. Really timely on so many different aspects as well. I think specifically starting with Musk and that the issues at the moment. I think it's given me a bit of hope actually seeing Tesla, I mean the stock and everything drastically reducing. It shows that collective action can influence major economic players and the economic system. My question for you would be, what would you say to those who are critical of economic degrowth? What would you say to someone that's very skeptical? And yeah, what would be your actions to take for them?
It's an obvious question, but I have
I
it,
know.
it's
I think sometimes the most obvious questions, but I feel like
Mm,
for people that
I,
aren't aware, like I can't remember who was saying earlier that loads of people didn't even know of the concept of degrowth.
they're two scientific insights that um, I learned when I first started my journey, which was only 2019.
Hmm.
I got involved with Extinction Rebellion, and I then discovered the IPAT equation, and I learned about ecological overshoot. Now, I had always been worried about what humans were doing. I always felt that we were headed in the wrong direction. But it wasn't until I learned those insights that the IPAT to me tells me growth is suicidal for or ecocidal. So but that is not necessarily enough. There are a lot of people who will just dismiss that because it has been and they will ignore climate, or in fact they will throw all of science out the window. And the reason is because it's too scary, it's too because they can't see a solution to it, then they would rather stay in denial. And what's more, they've got the president of the United States who's happy to deny something like that. So we've got role models all over who will happily throw the science out the window. And diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all the social advancements that we've made in recent decades, they're all part of the package. So when people start throwing climate science out the window, they will also throw social science out of the window. So that's what you have to be prepared for, that they're really scared, and so it's about getting enough. I talk about overpopulation because I find that such an emotive subject in the Western world, especially. I think if we can just admit that we're not being responsible parents at the moment, this is not a world that is safe enough to bring a vulnerable newborn. That's the reality of it. And I can see you're a young woman, and that is your age bracket is really important, because I don't have many, other than in the global south, I don't have many young adults who are interested in my message. And if you've got the courage to say, look, I'm not having children, and this is something you can go to your MP and say, I absolutely do not want to bring a child into the world as it is today. Do something about it. Do something really big about it, not just tinkering around the edges. So that you've got much more power than I have, because I'm obviously past that decision-making stage.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Imogen. Food for thought there. Dennis, you have your hand up there.
Yes, hi. I actually have a couple of things. So first of all, thank you so much, Barbara. I think it takes a lot of courage to talk about the population equation. And I think that even in the degrowth movement in the US, it's one of those topics that is almost taboo. And I wanted to see if I could, because I've been thinking about this, the election and the oligarchy for a long time. And the information that I've been able to find is that while the majority of Americans are concerned about climate, it's sort of, I hate to use that word, trumped by what people worry about their personal economy. That people feel that because we've been told that you have to have economic growth in order to have a vital economy. And so one of the promises that Donald Trump made was that he would lower prices for people of consumer goods, foods and gasoline and everything else. And I think that, there's got to be some questioning of that now with all the tariffs and the higher prices that are already coming about, that people will see that was an empty promise eventually. I don't know how bad the crisis has to get. But and then I have one more thing, and then I have a question. So one more thing is that, and this might somehow affect you, Naren, in Nepal. I don't know, but it's certainly an international problem, and that is the dominance of the dollar as an exchange medium. Okay. And I learned that that's connected with a number of things, but it's also has to do with oil, because it's the deal with Saudi Arabia that was secret until 2016, that Saudi Arabia only sells oil in dollars. Okay. There are other currencies that are used for exchange, but the dollar is the dominant currency. And that's, again, tied with the whole idea of GDP, gross domestic product, and that countries have to increase their gross domestic product of whatever it is that they make, whether it's bombs or oil or whatever, in order to show that have a good economy and that they can pay their loans. And then finally, my question is, what do you think about modern monetary theory and how that's being used in the degrowth movement?
There you go, Barbara.
I think Gary Stevenson is explaining that the money is a mythical thing. It is not of itself. You can't eat money, okay? And what we're doing at the moment is we've got this imaginary world that we've built, and countries with lots of money are not actually ecologically rich. What we need to do is to switch to an economy that works according to our ecological budget. So we look at the biocapacity of our country and try to work within that. So we're all working, nearly all the world is working on ecological debt at the moment. And unlike bank money from the banks, you can't just, make more land. The world is a fixed size. So I think we're headed for a global depression, basically. And what Trump is doing is speeding up that process. And I personally am grateful to him because he is waking people up out of their delusions, really. Because a lot of people felt fairly secure under business as usual, but business as usual is now collapsing. So we've got this opportunity for a very different way of going about civilization, and we need to have power devolved very, very low. The problem lies in our education and our judicial systems are both built to perpetuate business as usual. They're both built on the premise that we need economic growth and we teach our young how to be entrepreneurs, and all of that. Well, not all of it, but a lot of that is not helpful in the overshoot situation that we're in now. So this is where paradigm shift is a huge shift in mindset. I think there's totally different objectives from making money. You have to realize that you can't eat money, and that we're not going to be able to grow crops easily much longer. And we need to reorganize ourselves in the tiny time gap that we've got left where things are running reasonably well. Sorry, I'm not managing to read what's coming in through the chat at the moment. So did I answer the question? I've lost my way there. But modern monetary theory is not helpful because we just keep printing money. So every time we print money, we're increasing the ecological debt, as the eye patch equation shows us, that affluence drives up ecological debt.
Right.
Hey, thank you. That's important.
Yeah.
I'm putting our blog for my group into the chat for anybody that wants to take a look at it, and I will try to put notes from this meeting as well in that blog, but not right away, obviously.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, and I have to leave now. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
And we got two physical hands up. I think Richard, you were slightly first, and before David there. Richard.
Thank you very much. Well done, Barbara. As Barbara knows, I disagree fundamentally with pretty much everything she says, but by jingo, I appreciate her right to say it. And well done. It's great stuff. Um, I'd like to make one observation and then ask a question on the basis of that. Here is my observation. If you look back on human history, there has, as far as I can remember, never, ever, ever been such a dramatic shift from what is happening now to what someone envisages should happen, i.e., from where we are now to the world which Barbara envisages. That has never, ever happened before. And the only two sorts of event that project even something even remotely like it is war on an almost unimaginable scale. And in human history, there have been wars that have propelled humans to different places, or very specific religious events. I suppose to some extent the birth of Jesus and certainly Muhammad brought change to their regions, which were enormous. But even then, they weren't even remotely like the changes that Barbara envisages. Now, I have to also say that while I approve greatly of the Schumacher Institute, I'm pretty damn certain that Schumacher himself would not have approved of Barbara's talk or anything even like it, because the one thing that he did approve of was change that was within our compass to make. Now, what I would like Barbara to address just for a few minutes or a couple of minutes is how, Barbara, how in God's name, or whoever you think is going to guide this, how on earth do you think that you are going to get from where we are now to where we might go? And if I might say, just lastly, Imogen, who I don't know, and I'm sure she's a very nice lady, but she casually there wished death and destruction on Mr. Musk and Tesla. Well, believe me, the world in which Tesla fails is a world which will be unimaginable to any of us to live in. Now, Barbara, how do you envisage going from here to anywhere even remotely like you're projecting?
Right, there's a challenge, Barbara.
What I see has happened is we were doing pretty well after the Second World War. We set up the United Nations and we declared human rights, but we packaged it all in growth economics. So we were always set to fail. So we've run out of ecological resources now, which is why everything is crumbling. Now, a lot of people understand that. What I'm doing, my role is because I'm not particularly clever, I've come in with a very mediocre IQ and a ability to reasonable communication skills and writing skills. And what I've tried to do is just simplify the problem, because what the degrowth movement have done is that because they're too frightened of talking about overpopulation and talking about the extent to which we need to downsize, not just with overpopulation, but with consumption about as well. Both of them need to shrink by 75%, which is a huge challenge because we've been shoving this problem under the carpet. So I'm here. I'm just getting a conversation started, because I'm not an academic. I don't have any prestigious organization behind me that's going to be terribly embarrassed by what I'm talking about. And this is where Schumacher Institute is incredibly brave, because I've worked with all sorts of I mean, I was in the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and they asked me to leave, and quite a few other platforms. Extinction Rebellion asked me to leave their degrowth group because I talked about population. So I figure that thanks to the help from the Schumacher Institute, we've started a conversation that needs to be. You don't solve problems unless you talk about them, and this all the ideas that I've put forward, lots of other people have been working at them. They we're on a launch pad at the moment, and Trump is absolutely key in it.
But Barbara, most people in the world, the vast majority of people in the world, live now more comfortable lives than their fathers and grandfathers and any of their relatives in history. The meanest person, a poor man in England, lives better than a Saxon chieftain did 1,500 years ago. Why on earth should people believe that the way to solve any problems that we might have might be to throw away 1,000 years of progress? Why would anybody think that? I mean, I certainly don't. And why would these comfortable people of the Shoemaker Institute might? Because, you know, they go back to nice, comfortable houses and they'll have supper tonight, so they can think anything they please. But they're not gonna throw all that away in order to go and live in a shed somewhere.
Throw it away. I'm just suggesting we need to evolve in a different direction. I mean, our aspirations are to perpetuate what we had in the past, and that I'm just saying we need to change the aspirations instead of trying to perpetuate something that's on its last legs anyway. We need to start thinking imaginatively about very different education, very different media, because media is driving the whole political mess that we're seeing.
Well, good luck to you, girl.
Thank you. You've been very helpful, Richard. Helped me to understand.
I admire you greatly, Mrs. Williams. You go for it.
Thank you, Richard.
No
I think Schumacher would be delighted to have both of you in the conversation and continue with it all the time, because nobody's got the answers to any of this, and so we have to keep talking, which is brilliant, and that's why we are delighted to welcome Barbara into our fellowship. And I know we cover a wide spectrum of thinking, and that's so important nowadays. So just give your chance. David, you had your hand up before, please.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Maybe just in the line of what was discussed before. So I think one way to operationalize the ideas that Barbara has been playing is indeed to provide scientific evidence and to try to sustain how the claims that she's making actually can contribute to the better development. Now what I would like to be is a bit kind of positive. So if you go to the academia, the narrative is not aligned with the growth. So my vision, the academia is moving actually towards growth. So in engineering, at least, there is a lot of kind of motivation and push for moving towards research directions that are able to develop new technologies that can be capitalized, that generate new IP. And basically, it's all driven towards economic growth. So what I would like you to maybe comment on is, how do you think research can be proposed and funding can be received for doing research in the growth, whereas the academia is moving towards academic growth?
I agree with Gary Stevenson. I don't think it's not going to come from academia. It's going to come from outside, because did you find that talk I gave just, was that very technical? I felt that I tried to pitch it at a level that anyone can understand. So someone was saying earlier, it's about the general public basically demanding something better.
Yeah, no, I understand, but so if we want to support the general public, say, with academic work, so what would you kind of suggest or propose how the idea of degrowth can be solved in the academia landscape, where actually there is a push for growth, for developing academic growth, economic growth through academia? So how would you propose it?
You're actually in academia, aren't you?
That's my point. So the thing is, I see kind of the divergence between the two messages. So my feeling is academia pushes for economic growth, and this is the current landscape. Even with universities, we need more students, we need more and more. Whereas for supporting the message of degrowth, we would need actually propose ideas that go in the other direction. So if you are, for instance, if you were to partner with an academic to propose a project that aims to develop kind of new research that can sustain the ideas for degrowth, how would you kind of, what would be the message you will try to pass, or how would you frame this kind of research proposal? Or
Wouldn't. Research is far too slow. I wrote a research paper, and only one person was prepared to peer review it, and it isn't the way forward. It I would love to talk to students. I mean, I do go to a lot of talks at Oxford University because I'm based near Oxford, and I I've finally got one Oxford student who's interested in what I'm talking about because I always ask questions. And so if I could get into a common room and talk to some students, I'm sure that we could get, but they're so entrenched. Oxford University is so entrenched in the way they think. What's
thank you.
Alexander's?
Yeah. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? That universities are sort of in a reinforcing loop, that they need the economic growth message in order to get funding to keep them going. And so they are, that's why it's so orientated towards that. If it was the opposite, then I think they would find their funding drying up and the whole thing collapses. So once again, the kind of issue that we are faced in so much of our modern society is, we have these loops going on, reinforcing the behavior that we have all the time. Well, so
Joss, I think, has his hand up.
yeah, Joss, yeah. Yeah, sorry, Joss, you're muted there. So, yeah. Joss, you're muted.
Oh,
Joss.
Yes, I know.
Here we go.
Hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm the chair of a fellowship called COMMEET, and COMMEET was inspired by Mr. Mandela in his campaign to include normal, usual civilians to shape a better world. That is the discussion of Richard and Barbara. How do we get any further in these awful times? Well, Mr. Mandela said how impossible it may look. It always has seemed impossible until it is done. So never be discouraged. Stumble, stand up, and continue your efforts. That is also our slogan. Come and meet. Come meet is our slogan in the inspiration of Mr. Mandela. I want to come back to what Barbara and Richard were talking about. I understand both of them. We are confronted in our work every day with this dilemma. How do we encourage community groups to start for themselves towards achieving a better world, and without government policies that can block us or hinder us and so on? Now, there is some progress being made already that may encourage us. For instance, in Southeast Asia, there is a campaign that universities call themselves communiversities. That means that students are encouraged at least 1 year of their studies to be interested in the society around them and make a minor research program in the framework of their study. So they are trained to be linked to the society around them. I think that's a real progress. In the second place, we always have thought that people cannot achieve progress. Yes, people can, but they are very modest and not like Trump beating on their chest and say, I'm the chief monkey of all of them. No, they would do their work, and we try to find them, identify them, and show them to the outside world to get inspiration from them, to receive encouragement. Things can be done, really. So I'm not as desperate as Richard is, but I know that he's playing his role, and he does this very, very professionally. Again, my compliments, Richard, to encourage the discussion, at least. But we have progress, and I support Barbara's strive towards a better world. Thanks.
Thank you, Jos.
You've reminded me that there was, because somebody was asking just previously about how universities can get involved. I want to see them directly involved in the paradigm shift. But first we need that mindset. As soon as we are focusing on shrinking the economy, I'm sure the universities will be very helpful, but we haven't got to that stage yet. Alexander, you've been popping a few things in the chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for presenting, Barbara. I just want to reflect on what Richard Martin said, because I think he has a valid point. He highlights a key challenge, namely, how do we convince people who are economically better off than their grandparents to address the looming threat of global extinction in the next 1 or 2 generations? And as humans, we uniquely construct our perceptions of reality. And even though it contradicts basic laws of physics, and as William E. Rees states, we socially construct our reality, and the conceptual lens through which we perceive reality determines the kind of reality we perceive. We cannot regulate our interaction with any aspect of reality that our model of reality does not include. And I think that's a key problem of the human condition, and how we fight propaganda and how we get to what the truth is. So maybe you might reflect on that, Barbara. Thank you.
Mm. Right.
Yes, I am well aware that what we perceive as reality is different to everybody. It's our everybody individual job in life is to work out what's going on, really, isn't it, around them? So we all come to a different conclusion.
I think that,
and I think that if I continue just a few words, then it's like the challenge we face today is that people neglect the challenges, and they don't see the looming threat, because it might affect us in 10, in 20, in 50 years. And that's not perceived as a reality today.
Well, I think Trump's changing that. I think a lot of Americans, I mean, it's an autocracy already. So from where the commentators that I'm following, and I'm following it very closely because I see them at the sharp end of a process that is going on in Europe. The drift into fascism is happening in Europe as well, and there are some brilliant commentators out there, not obviously mainstream media, but we do have a social media platform, YouTube. I don't watch telly anymore. I'm always on YouTube watching different commentators, and you can get a whole different reality when you go into that sort of world. And a lot of, I mean, the people I follow, they've got millions of followers. So there's a lot of people who are seeing the reality that I'm seeing. So I mean, if I compare to when I started in 2019 to today, there is, I mean, just if you take this little group here, that more than one person has said they actually agree with my perspective or a lot of it. And that is hardly believable when I set out to have that degree of consensus in a little group like this.
We are we are all struggling, I think, with so much of this. Um, we are, in the Institute, we're very keen on future studies and thinking about where things are heading all the time. And all you can see is this, the traditional funnel of the future, as it's called. There are so many different ways it could play out. And we have just to try to think what the consequences of different scenarios might be. And we tend to range from dystopia to utopia. And in the middle, we have a very British concept of muddling through, which tends to be what actually happens in the end. It's never as bad as we think. It's never as good as we'd like it to be. But, somehow or other, something happens and something changes. Now, trying to see that and trying to get some sense of where you place your thoughts and how you construct your reality in that is important all the time. And I think having discussions like this helps us to formulate our own thoughts of where on that spectrum of the future we might want to be and where we want to see ourselves and what we want to do. Yeah.
I've had an idea about reality. We'll hear from you again, Alexander, in a minute. But in terms of, I find Wikipedia is quite a good reflection of consensus, basically. And I actually wrote an article, called the article called "Our Ecological Overshoot" was something that I wrote fairly early on, because although they had an article about Earth Overshoot Day, but they didn't have an article about ecological overshoot. Now, I would like to get a Wikipedia entry for the global aspiration that I'm suggesting, which I think is an essential balance to what was missing in the Declaration of Human Rights. Because this is where I think it's a lever at the paradigm shift level. If we have an aspiration to get back within the limits of the planet, that would drive us into the right direction, I think. But because it's so close to me, although I can write the article, I can't approve it. So if anybody is a Wikipedia authorizer, you might be able to help me make that a reality. So, Alexander, yes, you were going to carry on?
Yeah, thank you. Well, in Great Britain and Europe, we at the moment specifically challenged because with the EU states and European Union and Great Britain deciding to have a massive spending spree, unprecedented in since Second World War in militarization, we're basically throwing all everything like green transition, environmental protection, social security. We're throwing it out of the window, and actually, because most of people are convinced that the Russians are at the gate, even if you don't even have a border with them, and even if they ramped up their quote on world military spending from 3 to 5%, where NATO countries still spend 70%, and even the EU without the EU countries without the US spent significantly more on the military than Russia. So, and the same people who explain us that they fight with spades and computer chips from dishwashers tell us that then tomorrow they will be everywhere in Europe if we don't sacrifice everything for military spending, for even bigger military spending. And this is not only destroying our economies on the future basis but the future basis for any environmental protection and green transition. And war and the buildup of military is the most environmental degrading thing you can do. And as you can see in Ukraine, probably rebuilding there will cause more CO2 emissions than even the destruction before. That's it.
Mm.
Well, this is where addressing overpopulation, if we rise to the emotional challenge of accepting that a global birth strike would be wise, at least for a few years while we try and reorganize ourselves. If we do that, then building we should be able to cope without any new build at all, just maintaining what structures we already have and reusing them and increasing their heat capacity and insulation rather. Richard was going to say something. He's got his hand up.
Yes, sorry, I would use the little hands thing, but I can't see it. Can I just make 2 points? One is just about defense. I don't disagree with you about Russia. I think worrying about Russia is rather silly, frankly. But actually, I don't agree with you that defense spending is higher than it's ever been. Actually, if you look back over the last 1,000 years, communities and countries used to spend a far bigger percentage of their GDP or equivalent of GDP on defense than we do now. So I don't think you're right there. But more to the point, Barbara, you know this because we've discussed this before. You have this overwhelming idea always that when you want to talk about degrowth and everyone living in sheds and so on, you start castigating Mr. Trump and you say he's leading the country into oligarchy and he'll ruin the world and all this kind of stuff. Surely you realize that Mr. Trump, whether you like him or not, won an election and a very, very large number of people, he won the popular vote plus the houses, and an awful lot of people support him. And what he is doing to America and in the world is vastly less changing than you're proposing. So if you're going to castigate Trump and an awful lot of your YouTube bloggers, who incidentally earn their money from advertising, so they are very much in the Western economic tradition, I might say, all these ones that you like so much. But the fact is that Mr. Trump is proposing and doing and being excoriated for doing much less change than you're proposing. So you can't be surprised that if some people don't like Mr. Trump for what he's doing, a damn sight more people are going to be very, very opposed to you for the much bigger changes that you want to wreak on our lives. And I certainly don't want you to wreak it on my life. I think you've got to address that. I think either you've got to stop attacking Mr. Trump and admit that Mr. Trump is not doing very much at all compared with what you want to do, or you have to, if you think Mr. Trump is making these terribly big changes, you need to rein in what you want to do so that you don't get excoriated as you excoriate Mr. Trump. Does that make sense?
He's just got a better strap line than I have. I mean, he came out with "Make America Great Again," and everybody liked that.
Well,
so
true.
I just all we need is an equivalent strap line that people can get on board with, and of course we could do with a megaphone like Musk bought in X. I mean, I was on Twitter, and when after Elon bought it, then you were compelled to listen to his comments, and he would tell you could make a lot of money. It was very spooky and well, I mean, you would have to be very gullible to go
Joe's
along
answered the
with.
question. You do agree that he is doing far less to America and the world than you are proposing to do. The changes he's made are much less than the changes that you're proposing.
I think they could precipitate a world war and nuclear devastation, which is much more serious than what I'm suggesting, which is peaceful. And
I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think that's very likely, but frankly, it's still much less than you're proposing.
What do you think?
You're
Pressing the
proposing a
red
complete
button is
change to the way the world operates. He's not.
Yeah, I think we're up against the perennial problem here. I often think that there's a phrase that everybody uses sometime or other that if everyone were to do something, then it would be sorted, whatever the thing is. And that is the crux of the matter with us, isn't it? For 50 years now, since Limits to Growth came out, people have been saying we've got to change and make these things very different. We have to, restructure. We have to change everything. And it's always been that message: if everybody were to. And that's where I feel that our movement needs to really grab hold of that, because what Richard actually said a minute ago, I feel has got a merit in argument terms, that the kind of shift we're talking about, 75% decrease in consumption, etc., is a phenomenally shock to a world system. Now, it's a world system that's got so many bad things within it, and perversities in it. We need to change it, but we can't suddenly do a Trump on it. We can't do that because we're going to wreck it. And the outcome from that is going to be phenomenal if we're not careful. So how do we get back to everyone's got to be different concept? So that's, I think, the challenge.
The work.
Hmm?
I think Trump's doing part of the work for us
Well,
because he's doing that.
He may well be.
Dismantling.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point.
He's dismantling everything.
Yeah.
The economy's going to collapse anyway, with or without Trump. He's just speeding it up. So we've got global economic depression, and you need to fill the gap.
Right. It's a lovely argument, isn't it? I think we can. It's certainly not one that's going to run. It's going to run forever. This argument for a long time until maybe that train hits the buffers. I'm beginning to run out of metaphors to think through this one, but and we either see the light at the end of the tunnel or we hit the buffers. It's nice train analogies there. John, I'm going to give you a last word, if that's okay.
Again, I agree entirely with Barbara. But I certainly don't think there's any suggestion of a dramatic change here. I think what we have to do is build a rich collection of safety nets and lifeboats in the shadows, ready to actually enable some kind of gentler continuity once the reactionary elements, the fascists, the oligarchs, the kakistocrats, the kleptocrats have finished with their wrecking ball, because the planet can't support the way they are taking it. And if we're going to actually survive this, and more importantly, if the ecosphere is going to survive it, which is out of sight of most people, we have to do something to network around those idiots and all of their apologists. Okay.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a nice last question, a nice comment there. Barbara, any thoughts? Last thoughts?
Positive note there from John, and I'm looking forward to learning what his specialty is, because when he went into the detail, I couldn't understand at all, but I will try.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Barbara, for a fantastic and a very entertaining talk and discussion we've had since then as well. So yeah, a big round of thanks to you from everybody here, I'm sure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you everybody who came.
Yeah, lovely to see you. And look forward to seeing you all again. So please keep in touch.
Take care. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Well done, Barbara.
Yeah.
Yes, Richard.
Pardon me, could you please for yourself save the chat before you log out? Then you'll have it
Yeah,
for
you
later
should be able
retrieval.
to do it. You
Oh,
should be
really?
able to do it if you click on the bot, the three dots, get the chat open, click on the three dots. You should get save chat.
Have you got that there?
Not sure
No.
if it might be. It's just. Oh yeah. No, I think it's.
Alexander, have I got your email address somewhere?
No, but I can just write it here in the
If you
chat.
put that in the chat, either the chat gets saved for me, that and I'll send you the chat. Yeah.
It's because I'm a co-host that I can do that.
Great.
There we are. Lovely. Yep, we'll do.
So
Excellent.
thank you very much again, and I wish us all luck.
Luck.
Yeah, fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
you know, the people on the Titanic, they were rich, they were healthy, they just weren't very lucky.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks. Cheers, Alexander. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Barbara. And yeah, so jolly good. I shall put the recording up on YouTube. I might go through and edit out the unfortunate adverts we had.
I've got a license for YouTube, so I'd forgotten that happens when you don't have a license.
Yeah, no, I tend not to use it. I should have a license, I suppose. I've never done that one that way before.
Well, never mind. It's all a learning curve.
Absolutely, life is a learning curve. Yes.
It's interesting. I thought a lot of them wouldn't turn up. I was glad we got over 10. I think we did
Yes.
well.
It was a good number, 15. It's a good number to have actually, but good. Well,
Everybody got to say something.
yeah, indeed. Right.
So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Barbara. Look forward to meeting you one day. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Bristol's not far.
No, it's
Not far.
Right. Take care.